discovery. We embrace the unwavering belief that with passion, determination, and a spirit of resilience, nothing is truly out of reach.
It's an honor to be here today to share with you my personal story about one of the biggest challenges in my life that I faced, and that was getting in a wheelchair. Life's full of various challenges and decisions that we have to make. There's small decisions that we make every day, such as what do we have for breakfast or lunch? What do we do after work or after school? But these decisions don't really make a difference. We do them, we move on. Then there's the bigger decisions that we make in life. What college am I going to pursue? What kind of career, job, major? What house am I going to buy? Those are bigger decisions that we make in life and have a bigger impact. Then there are the really big decisions. I was a normal kid in high school, played sports. Baseball was one of my favorite. Knucklehead, sophomore at UCSB, at a Halloween party dressed up as a preppy frat kid drinking beer out of a beer bong. But I didn't like hearing no, especially from my parents. I was stubborn, but I was driven. I had goals, I got good grades, I did well in sports, but I also was a bit crazy. When I was 16, I asked my mom and dad, can I buy a motorcycle? And they emphatically said, no way. So I sat there and I said, why am I going to accept no? I've been working since I was 10 years old, saved a bunch of money. I said, I can buy a motorcycle. So I went out and bought a motorcycle. And when I came home, my parents were furious, as you would expect. But they understood I was driven, I was doing well in school, I was staying out of trouble, and so I got my motorcycle. I didn't always get my way. When I graduated from UCSB, my first job was up in the Bay Area, and I was going to live with my mom and dad for a year or two to save some money. I said, what a great idea if I get a puppy to surprise my mom and dad. So I packed up my car, drove up 5 hours to the Bay Area with my puppy and all my stuff from school, and showed up at home. Well, to my shock, mom and dad didn't agree with my surprise. So after about 30 seconds of realizing that I wasn't going to be able to negotiate out of this one, I got back in my car, drove 5 hours back to Santa Barbara, and fortunately my girlfriend at the time was willing to take my puppy. I was pretty stubborn back in those days. This picture is from Blizzard's Mouth, up off of Highway 154 here in Santa Barbara. And it was April 15th, 1983, almost 42 years ago. And a group of 12 of us, after a long week of classes at UCSB, drove up to Blizzard's Mouth to have a barbecue, play frisbee, hacky sack, sit in the sun and relax. 12 of us in 3 different cars, and we stayed up there for about 4 hours. Beautiful day, beautiful afternoon. We left at about 8:30 at night to go back to UCSB, and it was dark, and the driver of my car didn't see the sharp hairpin turn until we got really close. He slammed on the brakes, we skidded up to the edge, and it was an old station wagon that had no seats, no seat belts in the back seat, which is where I was sitting. And I grabbed onto the front seat in front of me to brace myself when we were skidding, and we came to a stop. I let go, relaxed, and thought we were good, and then all of a sudden, we went down the cliff. This is the ravine that we went down. We flipped over 4 or 5 times, resting about 200 feet below the road. I got tossed up, hit my back on the top of the roof, got knocked out, so I didn't remember the rest of it. And the 3 other friends of mine in the car, fortunately were not hurt, were able to climb out of the car and yell up to the few houses that were up in the canyon. There's not very many houses. And fortunately, one of the neighbors there heard the yells, and they called for an ambulance and a fire truck. This is where I woke up at 4 a.m. Beautiful nurse came into the room and asked me, do you know what happened? I said, I don't remember a thing. She said, you're in an accident, you hurt your back, you're paralyzed, and you're likely never going to walk again. and your mom and dad are outside talking to the doctor, and they just drove 5 hours down in the middle of the night from the Bay Area. And then she walked out of the room. She said, Mom and Dad and the doctor will be in a few minutes. So I had a few minutes to contemplate, what does this all mean? I didn't know anyone in a wheelchair. I was in no pain. I was young. I was 20, naive, stubborn, driven. And I was really worried about my parents because they had just driven down for 5 hours not knowing what happened to their son and what it really meant going forward. So I decided right then and there that this was not going to stop me. I was driven, and I got this. And I wanted to make my parents comfortable and confident that I got this. I wasn't very spiritual back in those days, but I had a feeling that God chose me for a reason, that I could handle it and maybe do something good with this in my life. So after being stabilized at Cottage Hospital, they flew me up to the Bay Area to go have surgery and then sent me off to physical rehab for 8 weeks, which is where I learned all the new skills that I needed to live life in a wheelchair. How to dress, how to take a shower, how to get out of bed, how to get out of a car, how to do wheelies, how to jump off curbs, all the things that you really needed as skills of being in a wheelchair for my new challenges. Physical rehab was great. I got strong. My friends came and visited me on the weekends and would take me out. And after 7 or 8 weeks, I was really ready to go back to college. And I really felt fortunate. I looked around me in rehab, and I met a lot of great people that were recently injured, a lot of people just like me, who had their upper body, would be independent, could live life without a lot of help. And then I saw a lot of friends that I met that had some brain damage or didn't have use of their upper body and had to be in an electric wheelchair. And I felt so fortunate. And I never looked back from that moment on. Part of the rehab process, besides the physical piece, was trying to get me ready to enter life in a wheelchair. So a psychologist came in to talk to me, an occupational therapist came in to talk to me. And these trained professionals sat there, by the way, they weren't in wheelchairs, trying to tell me, who was in a wheelchair, how I was going to feel or what I could or could not do in my life now that I was in a wheelchair. This really pissed me off. I was super upset, and it really motivated me. Well, I told them they could find the door on their way out and never come back and basically leave your cards on the table and we'll just move forward. I couldn't believe that they were trying to tell me how I was going to live my life. So I want to share with you some of the things they told me 42 years ago, and then what's actually happened. The first thing they told me was, you're going to be depressed. Now listen, I've had my bad days just like everyone else here, but it's 42 years later, and I'm still waiting. Second thing they told me, you're not going to be able to play sports. I love sports. Baseball was one of my favorite things in high school, but I played basketball and football. And so right away, I figured out, what sport could I play in a wheelchair? Well, there's lots of things you can do. I ski, I play tennis, I go fly fishing, played basketball for several years, hand cycling, and so on. The third thing they told me was, you're not going to be able to ride a motorcycle. And I loved motorcycles. You heard my story earlier. So after I graduated college, started working and saving money, I decided I was going to go buy a 4-wheel off-road ATV. Just get someone to put some hand controls on me and I'd be good to go. And it was just as good as a motorcycle. And I had a lot of fun with that for many, many years. The other thing they told me is, you're going to have a hard time finding a relationship. Well, I found Robin, my soulmate, and she is awesome. They told me that I was likely I couldn't have children. Well, I've got a family. I've got a large family. I've got 4 girls, ages 14 to 21, 2 of my own and 2 of Robin's, and we have a lot of fun together, and I'm truly blessed. One of the last things they told me is, you're not going to have a successful career. This is probably the one that motivated me the most, because I'd always been driven, always had goals, and I wasn't going to let this stop me from having a successful career. Well, when I graduated from UCSB, I basically had 2 jobs with Franklin Funds and Goldman Sachs over the course of 25 years before I retired at 48 years old. The first 13 years were with Franklin, and I was a young kid in their management training program, and within about 6 months, they pulled me out, put me into a leadership role in the investment management area where we were managing money for clients across mutual funds and individual accounts and so on. And by the time I was 30, I had done well enough where they promoted me to an executive vice president. There was only one of 10 in this company, and there were 3,000 employees, and there wasn't one employee, let alone an EVP, who was in a wheelchair. We were managing $50 billion. I had 40 employees, portfolio managers, traders, analysts, working for me and having a fantastic career at Franklin. This is when I was 30. When I was 36, I got a call from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs is one of the best-known firms on Wall Street, a firm that many, many people want to work for. And they asked me to come to New York and start a business, very similar to what I was doing at Franklin, but with a lot of personal growth opportunities for my career. I didn't want to move to New York, but I said, this is a great opportunity that I can't pass up, and so I went for it. Within 3 years, I did a pretty good job. They promoted me to a much bigger role and made me partner. Making partner at Goldman Sachs was a really big deal. 30,000 employees at the firm and only 400 partners. And again, the only person I knew in the company in a wheelchair, but certainly the only one who was a partner. I was blessed. I had a phenomenal 25-year career. Well, after those 25 years, when I was 48, I started to have some back problems. I had no issues for the first 26, 27 years after my accident, but then with all the travel I was doing for work, I had offices in London, New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, 200 employees that reported to me. We were managing $650 billion in assets, and I was constantly on the road working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and putting a lot of stress on my body. After my second or third surgery, my doctor said to me, if you want to see your daughter, Caroline, who was 2.5 at the time, grow up, get married, and have kids, you need to change your lifestyle. It's not sustainable. So decided to retire. Moved back to Santa Barbara, and it was my dream after graduating from UCSB. Came here in 2010 and started my next chapter in my career. All of these slides, or the logos up here on the slide, are companies or not-for-profits that I've been involved with for the last 15 years. And I've been truly blessed to be on lots of different boards, investment committees, advisor, investor, helping a lot of these companies deal with various issues and challenges. I love finding and fixing problems, and a lot of these entities, gave me that opportunity. I also love giving back. I find it really rewarding to volunteer, to mentor young professionals right out of school trying to figure out their lives, and especially helping folks that were recently injured to give them some insight what their journey might look like as they go out in the real world. So as I come to a close, I look at life as one that's full of curveballs that we get every day. How we deal with those curveballs is what's most important. For me, moving forward as soon as I possibly could after my accident worked for me. Not looking back worked for me. Not listening to conventional wisdom worked for me. And definitely not listening to no worked for me. So next time you have a challenge, what will you do? Will you look at this glass as either being half full or half empty? I encourage you to be optimistic and look at it as half full. But I also encourage you to deal with the problem and move on quickly. Surround yourself with a strong support system, friends and family. And once you move forward, never look back. Thank you.